Welcome, everybody, and can we get a roll call, please?
Yes. Commissioner Belser, Commissioner Smith,
Here.
Commissioner Haston,
Here.
Commissioner Ewert,
Here?
Commissioner Eisenberg.
Present.
All right, that's 4 present.
Good, we got a quorum. Welcome to the Knox County Historic Zoning Commission meeting. This meeting is broadcast on several television stations, so please remember to speak clearly and directly into the microphone. Please limit your presentation to 5 minutes. Anyone wishes to speak on an item, please stand and answer with "I do" to the following affirmation. Nobody wants to speak, huh? Okay. Thought that would change. I solemnly affirm that the testimony I'm about to give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Thank you. After you approach the podium to speak, please sign and illegibly printing your name and address. Any appeals of the Historic Zoning Commission decisions may be made to Chancery Court within 60 days. All right, Lindsay, can you, we got to approve, can I get a motion? Has everybody read the meeting notes from last meeting? Can I get a motion for approval?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes from the last meeting.
I'll second that.
In a second, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Minutes are approved. Lindsay, can you give us a report, please?
Yeah, absolutely. So we have not issued any administrative level 1 approvals in the Knox County Historic Overlay since the last meeting. So we would be jumping into our first case.
I failed also to mention that we do have a new commissioner. Ann, would you like to introduce yourself to everybody?
Good morning. My name is Ann Brooks Haston, and I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is the applicant present?
Okay.
Okay, is there opposition? Okay. Applicant, would you like to present first or let, I'm sorry.
And I'll run through the staff report.
Oh, I thought you were gonna, all right. Sorry.
No, that's great. Awesome. Okay, I'll introduce the case briefly and then we'll hear the input from the applicant as well. So this is a situation where the applicant is initiating the process to remove the historic zoning overlay on an approximately 5.77 acre parcel at the intersection of Governor John Sevier Highway and Thorn Grove Pike. So this is a parcel that was originally associated with the Ramsey House. On the screen here, you can see the overall historic zoning overlay as it stands today. The Ramsey House is here in the center. And then the parcel in question is this parcel on the west that's sort of an upside down L shape. So the Ramsey House was listed on the National Register in 1969. It received a historic zoning overlay in 1988. Review of this historic overlay's removal by the Historic Zoning Commission is the first step in the process. So in this situation, the county HCC will be providing a recommendation to the Planning Commission on the removal of the overlay. The Planning Commission is the body that will vote on the overlay's removal, along with any additional zoning changes. So the HCC's purview here is to evaluate how or if removing the historic overlay would affect the integrity of the Ramsey House overall. So as we can see on the screen, this property is currently zoned agricultural. The historic zoning overlay doesn't regulate uses and it doesn't prohibit development on the site. It's just that extra level of design review on the property. And the overlay is intended to designate areas of historic significance and require that new construction be appropriate to their character. In 2014, here's some context as well. In 2014, the Historic Ramsey House Board came in front of the Historic Zoning Commission. They subdivided approximately 9 acres on the west side of the property into one 5.77 acre parcel and one 3.34 acre parcel. So that's this whole piece here. And then it was subdivided into 2 pieces of property. The Historic Zoning Commission reviewed the removal of the overlay on this corner bit, right now the pink bit zoned PC, and recommended approval. And then the Planning Commission also reviewed and recommended approval of the removal of that historic zoning overlay. The parcel was rezoned from agricultural to planned commercial, and there is a Dollar General developed on that site today. So in 2014, the applicant, and I can go through some of these, this is the plat on the property, and we'll talk about some of the additional site conditions that are visible there, and we can also look at some Google Street View, et cetera, of the property. So in 2014, the applicant for the removal and the rezoning was the Ramsey House, or the APTA, the Association for Preservation of Tennessee Antiquities. So in 2014, they supported that removal and rezoning request because they were the body that was selling the property. In 2023, the applicant for the removal is the potential buyer of the property. Y'all have been provided a letter from the historic Ramsey House staff and board of directors saying the Ramsey House doesn't support the removal of the overlay. In terms of the site, there are no historic structures on the site. There is a 50-foot stream buffer, so you can see on the plat here, on the east side of the parcel, and there's also a recorded wetland area in the center on the plat. In the 2014 Historic Zoning Commission discussion, one archaeologist stated that resources have not been found on this site in terms of archaeology, but they did not provide details of any surveys. So in the staff report and in the agenda packet, we break down the concept of historic integrity as the National Park Service defines it. There are 7 factors of integrity, but the ones that are relevant here are setting. So setting is the character of the place where the historic resource is located. And then feeling, so that's surviving physical features that help the visitor experience an awareness of history, and then association. So the Historic Zoning Commission here should determine if this parcel contributes to the integrity, the setting, the feeling, the association of the overall property. In the opinion of staff, the 2014 rezoning and the development of this parcel to a Dollar General does detract from the overall integrity of the Ramsey House, which was originally a large agricultural and residential property. There was land that was both cleared and covered with trees. At the present day, there is an existing vegetation buffer. So it is a visual buffer between the Ramsey House and this development, although their site clearing and additional impervious surface may affect this adjoining vegetation and wetlands. There may be some compromise that's possible to retain the historic zoning overlay on a portion of the parcel, possibly this rear portion, but that is something that will ultimately be determined by the Planning Commission, and so we can run through those again as we need to. But staff's recommending that the HCC determine that removing the overlay on the entire 5.77 acre parcel would have an adverse effect on the integrity of the Ramsey House property.
Thank you, Lindsay. So the applicant's present and he'd like to defer? Yeah, okay, so who's the representative for opposition? State your name, please, address.
My name is Danny Manley, and I live at 2870 Mossy Oaks Lane in Knoxville. I'm speaking on behalf of the Ramsey House Board today. I am the recording secretary for that organization, and we would like to agree with Ms. Crockett's staff recommendation that this is not, removing the historic overlay will impact Ramsey House negatively. In particular, in the letter, I'd like to draw your attention to the 3rd paragraph, where we do speak about the buffer that the wetlands provide. We're also concerned about the ecological impact of having any sort of construction that could impact and damage those wetlands as they are protected. If you visit the site today, we do have images. You will see that that wetland expanding has caused a lot of the trees to die. So that buffer is not really as present as we thought it would, or as the board in 2014 thought it would remain during that time. So we do ask that you please consider not removing the historic zoning overlay, especially as we continue to expand and work more with the forest community and try to serve this family and their legacy as best as possible. Thank you.
Has the wetlands been determined as wetlands by like a geotechnical engineer yet?
Yes.
It has?
It has.
And what is the boundaries of the wetlands?
So I have some information on the determination, but on the recorded plat, there's a 3,441 square foot wetlands area that's called out right here. And there's a buffer and a stream buffer.
But it doesn't go on, I guess, the east side of that. I've got
I'm
pictures
gonna
of
pull
it.
that up on KGIS.
Is this up at the top of the property, or is this picture, where is this pictures taken from exactly?
You'll have to
Yeah.
introduce yourself and all that. Or Danny, you can continue.
So those pictures are taken from, so they were taken along Swan Pond Creek, which is the stream that runs beside Ramsey House into Sand Branch. Or sorry, it is Sand Branch that runs beside Ramsey House. As the vegetation barrier disappears between Ramsey House and the tract in question, we will lose the buffer that helps to maintain our serene outdoor environment that allows visitors to experience what life was like 200 years ago, and would also increase our ability to see and hear traffic from Governor John Sevier Highway.
So is that, the picture's taken around the guardrail on Thorn Grove? Because there's a guardrail here, one of the pictures.
Yes, that's correct.
Shooting back up on the creek. Okay. Is anyone else, anyone else from your side want to talk?
Yes, I've got several that would.
Okay.
Hi, my name is Mark Slajewski. I live at 5241 Sinclair Drive, Knoxville, Tennessee, 37914. I am the executive director at the historic Ramsey House. And I want to speak a little bit more to those images that we had put in front of you. Those were taken at the corner of the guardrail, actually on the parcel of land in question. And you can already see that there is a lot of trees that have started to deteriorate just due to the natural ebb and flow of the wetlands. And that 50-foot buffer that was originally put in place in 2014 has not stood up to the test of time. And that's something that we are worried about with the continuing development of this parcel itself. And I want to speak a little bit more to what the Ramsey House does and a little bit about who we are as an organization. Francis Ramsey was one of the premier families here in Tennessee, helped start the state of Franklin and the state of Tennessee, and his sons went on to start modern-day Blunt College, brought the railroads in. So they're a very important family to Tennessee's history itself. And that is a story that we share with thousands of visitors every year. In the fiscal year, or in year of 2022, we had over 500 school children come onto our property, and we actually use the wetlands as part of our interpretation as we tell the story of Francis Ramsey, because he actually chose the Swan Pond area specifically for its wetlands. He was a land surveyor for the state of North Carolina before he came to the state of Tennessee, or what was going to be the state of Tennessee, and he specifically chose the wetlands because he knew underneath it there was fertile soil for planting, and then the wetlands themselves were a vibrant community of mammals, birds, fish, shellfish. It's one of the most productive ecosystems you can actually have. And so that was one of the reasons he specifically chose his wetland, or this wetland, to make his permanent home. And we still interpret the original 1797 house. We lead tours 4 days a week, and we do special events specifically aimed at engaging our community members. And I just want to share that that's something that we're doing as an organization, actively sharing not only the story of the Ramsey family, but also of the land that he is on, and this parcel that butts up into this historic wetland that has existed well before United States settlers came to Tennessee, and will hopefully exist well after we are gone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hello, my name is Michelle Cox. I live at 6721 Otari Drive, Knoxville, Tennessee, 37918. I have been a board member since 2016. And I would like to express the following. For many years, dedicated people have used their time and resources to bring forward a visitor experience and setting so that we see what we do today at Ramsey House at Swan Pond in the context that it was over 200 years ago. I would like to share the board's land use statement, which is fairly new. Historic Ramsey House recognizes that it sits on the ancestral hunting grounds of the Cherokee. It also recognizes that its grounds served as a site of enslavement. Historic Ramsey House extends its respect to the Cherokee people and the enslaved Black persons who lived on this land and shaped its story. This is materially expressed especially in a new exhibit named A Community Born of Water and Stone, which highlights the contributions made by these people, the Ramseys, and others in the Forks area, and is a way for Ramsey House to give back to the community, thanks in large part to a grant made to us by Humanities Tennessee. Thank you for the opportunity to present to this committee and the public. I would like to call attention, if I may, to 5.80.05 area boundary clause, if you would, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else?
Sean Boland, 115 East Scott Avenue, representing Old North Knoxville, which is in no way related to this property. The board of Old North staunchly opposes this because any removal of an H1 designation erodes the integrity of all the H1 areas, not only in the county, but also in the city. And as Lindsay had pointed out, the landscape is a feature of this property. That's why it was designated H1, and that has not changed at all. Further, I want to point out that both the city and county commissions are quasi-judicial. They are not precedent-setting bodies, which means that you make the best decision with the information that you have, and you learn from that, and you evolve and you grow. Just because in the past a designation was removed, as it was here, we can see the implication of that. We can learn from that. We can grow from that. We can choose not to make that same mistake again. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Applicant? Good. Oh, sorry, just 1 second.
Good morning. My name is Kelly Weatherly Sinclair. Address is 2404 Thorngrove Pike, Knoxville, Tennessee, 37914. I live about a quarter mile from Historic Ramsey House. I was also its executive director prior to Mark. Not while that previous designation was removed. I was right after that, actually. The amount of visitors, just an anecdote here, the amount of visitors that came in and were completely surprised by the natural beauty that was preserved was, I mean, it could have been 80 to 90% that came through because of driving through a very industrial area. You're very skeptical. And then you come back and you truly are transported back to what East Knoxville would have looked like during Ramsey's time. So the wetlands are, of course, a part of that, as Mark already stated and everybody else already stated. I'll just point out, too, that there are no set plans, but I think when I was there, and I believe the board still shares this sentiment, there was lots of talk of using the wetlands and the 100 acres that we have to create, points of interest for people to come and explore wildlife, bird watching, animal watching. We've witnessed otters swimming in that creek. We've witnessed beavers building dams. And all sorts of wildlife surrounding it, even bears getting into the trash can over there. So the potential of creating a recreational area and a place of refuge and quiet for not only animals but the community the potential is really there for that. And I think that down the road that we will see that happen. So I just wanted to express that was really important to us, at least while I was there, executive director. I know Mark shares that sentiment as well as a nature lover. So thank you for your time. I'm supposed to sign this, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
I just wanted to let you know also, no matter which way this goes here, that wetlands will have to have a new determination if it's grown, and there's a new boundary around it, so, it's usually 60 feet away from it. So it's, that thing is going to grow, if in true that these pictures represent what's going on out there, someone will have to do a determination on it. So that's going to stay intact. You can't really go in there and manipulate a wetland.
Right, and
Just
I
wanted
was
to let
just,
you know that.
yeah, I was just saying, create some panels that describe what the,
I mean, yeah, I'm just talking about
Yeah.
in the whole thing
Yeah.
on the other side if it happens.
Great.
Okay, thank you. Applicant?
And that's plenty, Mr. Roten. That's the city, yeah.
Well, I agree with most of everything that's said, probably all of everything said, to be honest
Could you
with you.
state your name, please? I'm
Oh, I'm
sorry
sorry.
and everything.
My name is
Address.
Dale Roten, 4315 French Road, about a mile from the Ramsey House is my residence, 37920. Visited there before, and think it's a great thing. The property that we're speaking of is 5.77 acres. The map that I gave you is what I've actually applied to the zoning planning commission. I think I spoke with Lindsay about this. It's approximately 2.5 acres. If you see of the part here on front adjoining Johnsonville Highway. The rear is wetland. I've got pictures showing that. On their property is just ponds. It's not, I mean, cattails everywhere. It's unusable. It's not any benefit to me at all. So there's about 3.25 acres, 60% of the property that should be left alone. I like to leave that agriculture historic zoning. The front part, about 2.5 acres, that's on the highway, to be overlay removed. Let me specify that in a more better way. That the HC overlay associated with Ramsey House, the parcel was originally 9.11 acres, sold in 2014 to KMA Development for a commercial zone of a Dollar General store, which is 3.34 acres. It's all on the corner lot of John Sevier. If you're familiar with this, John Sevier and Thorn Grove Pike. Between John Sevier and Thorn Grove Pike, there is a, that's the parcel, the L-shaped parcel that's on your map. And that parcel in the very back is about, 3.25 acres. And then the Ramsey House to that L-shape is all on Thorn Grove Pike. So it can be separated into two zonings, which I requested through the planning commission to do, and leave the zoning as it is on the 3.25 and the front 2.5 to be on John Sevier. This property would mean that all of Thorn Grove Pike property, all the property behind the dollar store, the property behind that line, all would be left alone. So the visual would be impossible to see. I've got photos showing you the tree line needs to be left the same, which is there now on the back part of this parcel. The big trees, where the wetlands are on the Ramsey House property, if you look at the pictures, which I'll be glad to show you, are dead trees because the water flow has been there for years. It didn't just happen. And they're just dead, totally dead. But anyway, when KME was buying this property from Ramsey House, the president of the board at that time, Wayne Decker, recommended for all the 9.11 acres be zoned commercial because the wetlands were a buffer itself. I mean, if you wanted to, you couldn't use it because of wetlands. So anyway, he said that this property was bought in the 1980s when Ramsey House bought this property. And that also, in 2014, APTA President Frank McMinn, I don't know him, according to the minutes, recommended and agreed this property should be developed on the front part, on the part that he's buying, all of it. But that did not go through. He said, in his opinion, that they should sell this property for a historic purpose, which would be better served as commercial, and the proceeds of that sale would be long-term viability to the Ramsey House. A board member of Ramsey House, Connie Wallace, I don't know who that is, also allowed that she would not ever give up the wetlands, which all these people are saying. And I don't want it either. I don't want to give up the wetlands. So, it's my recommendation, and what I'm applying for through the Knoxville Planning Commission, is that the real parcel, of course, remain the same, 3.1 acres, or approximately 60%, 55 to 60%. And all the property that adjoins Thorn Grove Park, the real property line of Dollar General, would be left the same. The front 10 acres would be zoned commercial, and the historic overlay would be removed. At that time, there was Ms. Graybill with MPC planning staff, which said that it would be very restrictive if you took the overlay off this historic property. You had to take the zoning overlay off to be useful for a commercial piece of property. So I appreciate your approval in removing that historic overlay on the front part of the property. Thank you.
Mr. Roden, I got a question for you before we go to commission. Have you met with the people from the Ramsey House at all? You've tried to?
I met with Mark 3 or 4 times and asked him if they'd talk to him and meet with me. So they did, but it doesn't, I mean, I appreciate Mark. He was nice to me. I just couldn't get to talk to him. And at the time, my contract on this property with the due diligence had the 5.77 acres because that's what it's listed as. I had never any intentions, and we talked to Lindsay about this. The wetland can't be used.
Right.
Why, why, I asked her initially if it could be removed in part of the property, and she didn't, I think she said you could, but when I went to the zoning commission, that's what they recommended. So, I think that's great. I think we need to leave it like that.
And why couldn't you all get together to meet?
I don't know.
Sure, yeah, before we go to commission. George. I'm gonna go to commission. Okay, come on, yeah, 1 second. Mr. Roden, can you stay there for 1 second? Commissioner Smith has a question.
Yeah, so Mr. Roden did come to the Ramsey House a couple times, but he never actually asked to meet with the board. He just asked for us to write a letter asking us to remove saying that we'd be comfortable in removing the historic overlay on the property in question. And I said I would pass it along to my board, but he never had made any indication that he wanted to appeal to my board in person.
Okay.
And
Thank
I
you.
did say that I couldn't use the wetlands. I would be willing to not do that. I said I would, on the wetlands, needs to stay the same.
So you had asked me for a letter removing the historic zoning overlay,
Yes.
and that's
Okay.
that's all that I got from Mr. Roden.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Smith.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask the applicant, is there no way to develop under PC with the historic zoning in place? What are the impediments of doing
Well,
that?
according to Mr. Gobiel, and them, no, I mean, it's just, there's not. I mean, for commercial property, you need to utilize, I mean, I guess I don't know if you could or couldn't, but everybody advises me it's a terrible idea. And that's according to Ms. Graybill with MPC, even back in 2014. That's her opinion. So, I mean, most people agree to that, especially
Lindsay.
commissioners.
Can you
Can you
weigh
answer
in on
that? Is it,
please?
I mean,
Sure.
it might be more difficult, but is it,
The historic zoning overlay does not regulate use in any way, and it doesn't prohibit development on the site. The intent of the historic zoning overlay is to require that new construction on a property be appropriate and respectful to the historic character of the site that it's associated with. So the only extra element associated with the historic zoning overlay is a meeting like this for design review for new construction on the property.
so what would happen is, the applicant could meet with staff and they could have a discussion of what the expectations are, then he develops a site plan and a building plan of what he wants to do and goes through the design process. Is that kind of how that would work?
Exactly. And we also, I think this happens a little bit more in the city, but we offer a workshop format too. So the applicant would have the capacity to come in front of the county HCC in an informal meeting and get advance input on the new construction and before submitting a formal application for new construction. So there's a lot of layers of advanced discussion about new construction on the property being compatible with the historic site.
For me personally, the fact that previously the board was in support of the removal of the overlay, and they're not now. So, I mean, I'm not convinced that
Well, may
you
I
wouldn't
ask,
have use of the property even with the overlay.
the reason why they were in for it at the first time, it was, I mean, no offense, but they didn't get, they applied for this because it had to get approved, or they wouldn't sell the property to these people. They didn't get paid a check. I mean, I don't mean that bad, but, so that's the same position I'm in. It's on a due diligence, and, with a historic overlay, it restricts you, and I would not be interested. I mean, I'm gonna back out this deal, and I think I'm probably the most generous person around in what I want for Ramsey House. This does not affect Ramsey House. You've got a tree line, you got all the road frontage from Thorn Grove Pike, or as you can see, it's a quarter of a mile to the Johnsonville Highway from the Ramsey House. Well, you gotta go a quarter mile just to even see this property, you gotta turn 600 feet or more to go up to get an entrance in the property. You can't even enter this property within almost a half a mile from Ramsey House. It's the back way, that's why you leave the zoning, that's why you leave the wetland, that's why you leave it alone, for they will have their own, they can do whatever they want to. For is what they can use this for, they won't have any restrictions. I mean, it's still historic overlay, but they can do what they want to on their property. And if you wanna look some pictures, it's just plain wetland. I mean, it's got ponds.
You don't own the property currently.
No, I'm on due diligence.
You have it under contract.
That's correct.
And who's the seller?
KME, the people that buy it.
Oh, okay. All right. That's all I had. Thanks.
Yes, sir.
What are you looking at rezoning to?
A
PC?
commercial,
PC?
probably CA, or commercial CA is what I applied for to the planning commission.
All right,
But, I mean, that's what was recommended by Wayne Becker back in 14, was that.
All right, thank you, Mr. Roden. Go to commission. Anybody got any comments, anything?
I do have a question. What are your plans for development? What are you
Well, I've
wanting to
got two or
put
three
there?
grandkids that live there close. I wouldn't mind putting a building on it for them, or something of that nature. Depends on what's available. I need to look at the different options I have and see the feasibility study, but without this going through, there's no need in me spending money and time on trying to do a feasibility study without knowing I can get the historic overlay off, and it also approved through the planning commission.
Certainly. Did you have any ideas when you went into contract of what you might want to do as far as structures or?
No, I mean, that's what I do a lot. I mean, I've got some other properties on Clinton Highway, of several things, that I lease, and some that are vacant, but, not a lot. Just, I was in the car business for 25, 30 years for Bergen Dodge. And, if I would so, I'd try to put me a lot on there, to be honest with you, because I owned a lot prior to that, but I mean, I'm not going to now, but I mean, I don't mean a junky lot, buy here, pay here, I'm talking about nice autos, but, I'm too old for that now, but anyway, I'd make something nice.
I'm ready. Go ahead.
Oh, you ready to make a motion?
I can if you were ready.
Okay, yeah, well, any other discussion on commission? Okay, I'd like to entertain a motion.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion that we deny the request to remove the overlay as per staff recommendation. I think that's it.
We got a motion, do I get a second?
I'll second it.
We got a
I'll make a
second.
comment real quick. The staff recommendation was for the total 5.77 acres, not for the whole overlay. The
That's-
staff recommendation was
that's
not for
correct.
5.77 acres, it's only for the partial.
Okay, maybe I should
I don't-
clearly understand it. What's the what is the application for?
So what you guys are doing right now is making a recommendation to the planning commission. So I would say that your initial motion is appropriate. The applicant will still have the capacity to apply to the planning commission for the rezoning with more specific boundaries if he wants, but this would be representing the stance of the Historic Zoning
Yeah, it
Commission.
says that the entire 5.77 acre
Exactly.
parcel.
Correct.
And so do you understand, my thought is that I want to respect what the people applied for years ago to protect the property. The difference was on the previous, in my opinion, that the board was in support of it. And in this situation, they're really not. And I'd also like maybe to understand better why you couldn't use it with the overlay. But that's
Well, I
the
mean, I'll be
reason.
honest with you,
I've done it.
they had 10 years and can still buy this property if they want to purchase this property. But if you spend that kind of money, you sort of want to do a little bit and sort of restore what the Ramsey House is really concerned about. The wetlands is all I've heard.
Commissioner,
The front portion of our property
Yeah.
is a long way.
Mr. Roden, we're a commission right now. I appreciate everything you can take up, whatever, once you get to the Metropolitan Planning Commission.
Yes, sir.
So we've already got a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Can we get a motion to adjourn?
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Second. All right.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you all very much.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate your time. I'll hand it over to the distinguished Mr. Blackburn.
Thank you.
Good morning. Welcome to the October 19th meeting of the Knoxville Historic Zoning Commission. This meeting is broadcast on several TV stations, so please remember to speak clearly and directly into the microphones. Dallas, will you call the roll, please?
Yes, Commissioner Blackburn,
Here.
Commissioner Eason,
Here.
Commissioner Bradley,
Here.
Commissioner Fox is excused, Commissioner Hearns,
Here.
Commissioner Mitchell,
Here.
Commissioner Randazzo,
Here.
Commissioner Tillman,
Here.
and Commissioner Webster is excused. That's 7 present.
Thank you, Dallas. At this time, we'll have a swearing in of the speakers. If you wish to speak on an item, please stand now and answer with "I do" to the following affirmation. I solemnly affirm that the testimony I'm about to give shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Thank you. We ask that all speakers please limit their presentation to 5 minutes, and also that speakers please give their name and address before speaking. Please sign in at the desk, legibly printing your name and address. Any appeals of any Historic Zoning Commission decisions may be made to Chancery Court within 60 days of the date of this meeting. At this time, we'll have the approval of the minutes. Motion to approve?
I'll second. I'll second.
Okay. I wasn't really making a motion, but that's okay. All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Lindsay, will you take us through the staff reports?
There were no level 1 COAs issued since the last meeting.
All right. Well, let's just jump in. The first case, it is in the Fairmont Emory Land District. It's at 1527 Fairmont Boulevard. This is case 10-C-23-HZ. And Commissioner Tillman, is this one of the ones that, okay. Do you want to?
Yeah, I'm recusing myself from this case due to a professional relationship with the architect and applicant.
Okay, thank you. Lindsay?
Okay, so this is a new screened-in porch on the rear elevation. This porch will use the existing foundation and deck and remove the non-historic flat roof, which you can see in the top right here. The porch measures 20 feet wide by 16 feet deep, and the new porch will feature a front gable roof clad in asphalt shingles, decorative wood arches, a wood post and beam structure, and a 2-part sliding door.
Lindsay, I need to recuse myself as well because of a personal relationship with the applicant.
All right. Got
And if
it.
I could ask those who are recusing, if you could just sit on the side with the public. Thank you. Sorry to kick you out.
Okay, so the existing deck being modified was constructed without permits in approximately 2020. It doesn't contribute to the historic district, so removal of that porch roof is appropriate. This new porch will be located on the rear of the building, and it will not be visible from Fairmont Boulevard. It will not result in the removal or modification of any character-defining features. It does draw from the existing roof line and interior and exterior details from the house. It uses materials compatible with the guidelines. So the recommendation here is to approve 10C23HZ as submitted.
Thank you, Lindsay. Is the applicant present? Name and address, please.
Forrest Kirkpatrick. My address is 1409 Granger Avenue, 37917.
Thank you. Anything to add to what Lindsay said?
I think it's pretty self-explanatory. Happy to answer any questions.
Okay. We'll get to that in a moment. Is the neighborhood representative here?
I received email input from Steve Cottom, the neighborhood representative for Fairmont Emeryland, and he concurs with this application and the staff recommendation.
Very good. Any questions or comments from the board?
I'd like to make a motion.
Thank you.
I'd like to make a motion to approve. I didn't get the orientation.
Push that button.
I would like to make a motion to approve based on staff recommendation.
Thank you. Thank you. We've got a motion properly seconded. All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? No. Thank you very much. It's approved. All right. Our next case is the same area. It's at 1707 Emeryland Boulevard. It's case number 10-D-23-HZ. And
Can we bring the other commissioners back?
no, I believe it's the same situation. It's
Oh.
the same applicant. So,
Okay.
yeah.
Stay out there.
So Lindsay?
So this is a new rear addition. It's 38 feet 8 inches wide by 18 feet deep. It features a carport at the ground level. And I'll go to this real quick. A carport at the ground level, one full story, and then a second story that's approximately 14 feet 3 inches wide. So you can see that here. Adjacent to the second story, there is a deck with a steel tube and cable rail. The addition will be framed with a structural steel and wood frame and rest on a steel plinth foundation. It features a flat roof with a break metal aluminum coping in corners, an exterior of fiber cement siding panels with a stucco finish, and then aluminum reglets separating the panels. So you can see the rear elevation of the addition here and the side elevation here, and I'll jump back to the existing conditions of the house for reference. So that's the rear elevation of the house on which this will be constructed, and there's the front view of the house. So the addition will be located on the rear of the house. It's minimally visible from the right-of-way. The placement is appropriate. The addition will incorporate elements of the style of the main house, and it will remain differentiated from the main house by the use of contemporary materials and a more simple design. Overall, the height and scale of the addition are appropriate for the new house while incorporating additional interior space. The height will align with the existing elevated massing on the rear elevation, so you can see that there. The roof pitch and exterior cladding materials are compatible with those on the existing house, and then these multi-light windows are compatible with the 6/6 double-hung windows on the primary house. The proposal is for fiberglass windows, which meet the design guidelines and are generally compatible with the original wood windows. So the applicant is, so the staff recommendation is approval of 10D23HC as submitted.
Thank you, Lindsay. Is the applicant present? Yes. Do you have anything to add, Forrest?
I think the one thing I would just want to point out is that it's a very unique house and a very unique part of that neighborhood. It is somewhat of an entry. It is, and I spoke with the neighborhood representative, the house itself is too small and does need an addition. The owners and I went back and forth on this a little bit. It's a CMU house, an early type of CMU with a stucco finish. The stucco is held up remarkably well, and so we just want to do it justice by not trying to replicate it, but to play off of the massings and the spaces and do a contemporary interpretation of the original structure without trying to degrade it by mimicking it.
Okay, thank you.
That's it.
Anything from the neighborhood rep?
They found that this meets the design guidelines and they support the staff recommendation.
Very good. Any questions, comments from the board?
I'll make a motion to approve
Thank you. We
per
have a
staff
second.
recommendation.
I'll
Thank-
second that.
Thank you. We have a motion properly seconded. All those in favor, aye. Any opposed? No. Thank you, Forrest.
Thanks.
Right. Okay. Next case is in the same neighborhood, different applicant, so our commissioners can rejoin us. This is at 1701 Emery Land Boulevard, and it is case number 10E 23-HZ.
Okay, so this proposal is all work that is located on a rear deck on the existing house. So you can see the images of the deck here, and then here's a Google Street View image of the house itself. And the work is concentrated on this area that I'm highlighting in my cursor, the rear deck. So the proposal is to fasten these existing wooden railings to the rear elevated patio. They've already been installed. Then the proposal also includes the construction of a metal roof over a section of the patio. So the applicant has provided this drawing here. It's supported by six 6x6 wooden posts. The drawing doesn't include the exact square footage of the proposed roof structure, but it will cover half of the existing patio, so approximately where my cursor is here. So the proposed railings are compatible with the main house. They'll be minimally visible from the street. The proposed roof structure is not related to the roof line or the architectural style of the primary house. It's a ranch house. It will be minimally visible from the public right-of-way as the property does slope towards the rear, and it could be removed without any effect on the primary structure. The drawings provided do lack some details. The applicants should provide information on the roof pitch and the height of the structure. The porch roof structure should be confirmed to be lower in height at the roof peak than the primary structure, so it is not visible or minimize visibility from the right-of-way. So staff's recommending approval of 10E 23HC subject to the conditions that the applicant provide final elevation drawings and site plan to staff for approval, and that the overall height of the roof structure be less than the height to the roof peak of the primary structure.
Thank you, Lindsay. Is the applicant present?
My name is Cynthia Brady, and I live at 1701 Emerald Boulevard. And the railings that are there right now are not permanently fastened on, but we had to do that for the safety of our grandchildren because the original railings were too short and too wide. So we've done that. But we would like to construct on the rear portion of the deck, we would like to construct a roof because it's very hot out there on the patio and it's almost unusable in the summer because it's so hot. So it would provide shade there. The intention is for a 412 roof pitch, so it would not be taller than the house, so it would not be visible from the street. And we can do more. Lindsay suggested that we do more detailed drawings to submit for a permit, but that drawing there is just of the back of the portico. So it would cover the back half of the portico so that it would not block the sunlight from the original house, and we didn't want to involve the roof line of the original house.
Okay.
Are there any questions?
Thank you, Mrs. Brady. Any questions? Go ahead.
On your drawing, it looks like it's two sections. So on this picture, would it be like just the last two sections back
Just
there?
the last two sections.
Okay.
And that drawing looks slanted. That happened when I took the picture of it somehow. They would be straight, of course. But it's the last two sections of the portico.
Any comments from the neighborhood rep?
The neighborhood rep on this one just spoke to the fact that these neighborhood conservation design guidelines don't have elements that speak specifically to this project.
Okay.
And so they were in agreement with the staff recommendation.
All right, good. Open it up to questions, comments.
I am less familiar. We don't see as many ranch-style houses in these meetings, but in the neighborhood just a year or two ago, there was a similar proposal, and we made the suggestion that they do full lap siding instead of the open wood design. So I don't know what would be appropriate for a ranch. I believe that was a craftsman-style home, but we should have conversation about that.
Just to clarify what Commissioner Randazzo was saying is, this application that she's speaking about, it was a corner property and they built a screened-in porch addition that projected off the rear corner. And it being a corner lot, it was pretty visible from the street. And the staff recommendation and the commission recommended that instead of an open gable design, they enclosed this gable field with lap siding to be compatible with the house.
So that would be slightly different from this particular situation where you're likely not going to see those gable ends from the street, correct? Is that correct, Lindsay?
Yes.
Just making sure I
Yes.
understood that properly.
I still get nervous about using that argument because you do have neighbors that live behind your house and it's visible to them. And as we see more accessory dwelling units in the rears of our properties, I don't know that that's the best argument, but I'm not familiar with this design style and what would be more appropriate.
Beth?
I think I agree. I do agree with, I think we should think about closing that gable. And so, because I do think you might be able to see it from the sidewalk.
Okay.
Will there be any, sorry.
It would be difficult to see from the sidewalk, but I suppose you could. It wouldn't necessarily be visible from the adjoining houses, from the back of the adjoining houses, because they would see we were just trying to keep it so that the airflow so that we would not restrict airflow.
When we talk about visibility, we're talking about visibility to the public, right? Okay, not just to the neighbors, because of course they live there. I mean, not to distract from, but just keeping it kind of in line with our thought process when we think about visibility.
My question for the applicant, will there be any additional vertical supports to support this structure? I see 3 columns in this addition, and I'm looking at the portico porch. I see 2 metal posts that are load-bearing to bring that load to the earth. Are you planning on?
Yes, there would be a third one.
We're adding a third metal post
to bring the
coincide.
load to the roof, to the ground.
Do you know approximately how far the structure will be from the existing roof?
From the existing roof?
Mm-hmm. What amount of open sky between, 6 feet, 8 feet, 4?
It's about 15 feet.
The space?
Open sky.
Okay. I can make a motion, unless anybody else has any questions.
Go ahead.
I'll make a motion to approve with the conditions by staff for final elevation and site plan for staff approval and the overall height to be less than the roof peak of the primary structure.
Okay. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I second.
All right. We'll call the vote. All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. Thank you, Mrs. Brady.
Thank you.
All right, 4th and Gill, 616 Luttrell Street. And this is case 9D 23-HZ.
Okay. So this application was postponed at the September 2023 meeting. And so what is in front of us are revisions to the previous submission. So what I'm going to show here, and I can pull back the previous application, what's in front of us today and what I emailed to the commission is a response to the staff report. So the staff report relates to what was initially submitted, which was a full-length hipped roof porch here, and I can pull that up for reference if we'd like to discuss. But I think we can focus on this most recent submission that was emailed to y'all this week. So I can go back and we can discuss this as well, but the project is a major exterior rehabilitation project focused on a large non-contributing building, which was originally 2 buildings and then joined together as one. This project was postponed at the September 2023 meeting after extensive discussion of the building's evolution and its proposed design. The applicants had initially proposed a trellis on the facade as well, and plans review and inspection staff noted that that could not be installed as proposed. So the revisions to the design, to the drawings from the previous meeting include changing the multi-light 4x4 and 6/6 windows to 1/1s, and then installing a porch instead of the trellis. So the applicant has responded to the staff recommendation and incorporated 2 projecting front gables on the roof line. So that will extend over that porch, and then the windows have been revised as well. I can go back through the previous staff findings, but I would make one clarification. So at the previous meeting, we had conversation about a non-contributing building, and in the application packet, there's a document prepared by the previous historic preservation planner in 2017 describing the difference between a contributing and a non-contributing property. So a building status as non-contributing is not the same as a vacant property. Work on a non-contributing building is evaluated for its effect on the streetscape and the overall district. The design guidelines still apply to non-contributing properties, although greater flexibility may apply for these buildings because they don't contribute because they don't retain character-defining features. So as we can see there, there's a lot of character that's lost in this context, but it still exists. So recognizing the staff recommendation, again, here pertains to the previous submission that has not incorporated these front gables. But the staff recommendation was recognizing that non-contributing buildings are evaluated for their impact on the historic district and not as infill construction. The commission should discuss this proposed project's exterior rehab and identify if additional design elements are necessary to acknowledge the building's evolution. So the staff recommends at least one design element be incorporated that acknowledges the original form of the building that could be expressed in the front porch roof line. That's the recommendation that the applicants have submitted or responded to. The commission should also discuss the proposed siding materials. Fiber cement siding has not been approved as a replacement material on original buildings in the district, so staff recommend that those be wood lap siding and trim elements. And then the additional conditions of approval would include that the final window specs of the windows, front doors, and deck materials be submitted to staff for approval.
Thank you, Lindsay. Is the applicant present? Would you like to speak?
Hello, everybody. I'm Suzanne Taravella from Sparkman and Associate Architects, 2908 Sevier Avenue, Knoxville, Tennessee, 37920. Thank you for that, Lindsay. There's been a lot of back and forth about this project, so I'm happy to answer questions, but what you see before you today is the result of a lot of collaboration and discussion to get to a reasonable, and I think better at this point, design for the community and for the owner. They're happy with it, we're happy with it, we hope that you all will be happy with it as well. It reflects the history of the building, the fact that it's still there, that it's been sort of made to look very ugly over the years and now kind of being restored to a single-family residence that is not a contributing structure but complements the neighborhood.
Thank you. Is the neighborhood representative here?
Aaron Streeter is on Zoom.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes. Go ahead, Aaron.
All right. Aaron Streeter, 925 Eleanor Street, representing 4th and Gill. Like the neighborhood would really like to thank the applicant for these last-minute adjustments. We are entirely in support of staff recommendation. And wanted to concur with staff that just to make the point that the neighborhood has really been very consistent over the years of not approving fiber cement siding on original buildings, only for infill buildings. But again, thanks to the applicant for these adjustments. I think it makes me personally a lot more comfortable with kind of reflecting that history that these buildings do represent to the neighborhood.
Okay, thank you, Aaron. Commission, we'll open it up for questions for the applicant or the neighborhood rep.
I have a quick question for clarification. So are you now proposing wood siding and not the fiber cement? in
We
the
would
most
still
recent-
like to use fiber cement. I don't think that that's a deal breaker necessarily, but the fiber cement is allowed on other historic properties, and this is a full re-siding of a property. It's not just patches being replaced. And so we feel like since there's sort of a wholesale change in the siding of the property, that it's appropriate to use fiber cement. Natural wood is not as durable as it once was, and using a hardwood siding is a pretty significant cost increase for a building like this. And so we feel like fiber cement is an appropriate choice.
I'd like to hear thoughts of our fellow commissioners on that, for sure.
I'm in favor of using wood siding and trim elements. I'm also in favor of the revised design with 3 front-facing gables. I do have a procedural question, maybe a parliamentary inquiry. How do we approve a revision that's not exactly what the file number, case number was? Do we just describe what we're looking at?
As far as changing the prior recommendations, or?
No, like this revision with the 3 front-facing gables isn't what was in our packets. It was sent earlier this week.
So you have the capacity to approve the documents that were submitted to you and are in front of you today.
Okay.
Yeah, that can be incorporated into the record, and that's what the record overall will reflect, that it did come before you today as an attachment.
Awesome. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other comments?
Thank you all for taking the time to work on the redesigns. It shows that you've listened to the community, and this tells a story. I did have a question about the siding. Can you clarify if it would be smooth or textured?
Smooth.
Thank you.
So I was just gonna ask the commission, I think we did approve something in the past, but I think there was a question about the siding, whether it was gonna be smooth or textured the last time, right?
So typically, in Fourth and Gill and in other historic districts, when fiber cement lap siding is approved by the commission, it's smooth finished over wood grained, just because it's being representative of what it is. It's not wood, it's a different product. So we typically require things to be smooth finished, and then also have an exposure pattern, like the overlap that's comparable to wood lap siding. Do you know about the overlap that you guys would be proposing?
I think that it would be a 4-inch exposure.
I'll make a motion unless anyone has another comment.
It appears that the front railing is original or is going to be a reproduction very close to what it was. Could we look at the side elevation?
Oh, sorry.
Yes, there. That is going to be somewhat visible because of the vacant lot on the other side. Had you considered perhaps mimicking the verticality of the front railing with the back instead of a horizontal?
I think we could be open to that. Again, I don't think that's a deal breaker one way or the other. We were assuming that this wasn't really visible because we don't really know what the lot development next door is going to be, but that's a change that I think we're willing to make.
If I may, I'm the property owner, and it seemed like there was some.
Name and address, please.
Jeff Tallman, 616 Luttrell Street.
Thank you.
I checked the minutes from the September meeting, and I did not see any conclusion regarding Hardy Board. But it seems to me that it was discussed favorably in our meeting. Is that the recollection of anybody here? And I've had discussion with Ms. Wetzel, who and her husband Bob, who are neighbors, friends, been involved with neighborhood revitalization since the early 80s, and we've had these discussions. While recognizing that Fourth and Gill Historic Overlay does not address or does actually prohibits Hardy for existing, there is a building just right around the corner, probably 100 feet from the subject property that does have Hardy. It's an anomaly in that it is not included in the overlay district, but it's still there for passersby and for those who are aesthetically pure to have to suffer through when they drive by it. Anyway, it's my strong pleasure or desire to work with Hardy. I mean, all of this, everything on this building. This building is a shack. This building was a shack when it was new, and so Hardy, and I'm in favor. Per your comment, Mr. Tillman, I like wood. This is my third ground-up renovation in the neighborhood, and what's remarkable is the durability and the quality of old wood siding. But what we're dealing with now is not old wood siding. We're dealing with new wood siding, which basically is considerably different in its standard and durability. So all things being equal, this is I don't think it's a compromise aesthetically, but it is a cost in terms of doing it. So that's the request I'm making to commission.
I have a question. Have a question. You referenced the conversation with Mr. and Mrs. Wetzel. What was their opinion on it?
They're fine with the design changes, and I don't have it in writing, but that Hardy was fine.
Okay. You don't need it in writing. I trust all of you.
Yeah.
Has Aaron, I know he's on the line, does he have a comment regarding that?
Thank you.
I guess the only thing I could add to that is Melinda Wetzel is on the board, and the board did approve support of staff recommendation, which doesn't support the fiber cement. So, I mean, I can't say what her feelings are personally. I can say what the board agreed to altogether.
I would just clarify that based on the property owner's comments about the minutes, we record these meetings now, so the minutes are pretty, they are not specific to the conversation. We don't detail each line of the conversations anymore because we refer folks to the recordings. So it wouldn't have been referenced in there, but it's the applicant's, or it's the commission's responsibility and purview today to make the determination whether the preference and what meets the design guidelines is wood siding or fiber cement.
I will add, I don't recall us discussing that in detail at the last meeting. There were several other things that were of more concern. I don't think we got to that detail.
Yeah. No, it wasn't in detail, correct, but it was mentioned.
I think it's a discussion that we've had a couple times, maybe more than that. We, as the commission, are held to the design guidelines as they exist. Exceptions do get made. The greater conversation that Old North, or Fourth and Go, needs to have is if they want to adjust those design guidelines. We can't continue to make exceptions forever. Eventually, they need to be redone. The Edgewood Park City guidelines have not been fully adopted by City Council yet, but they do allow for hardy board siding. So it'll be determined if other neighborhoods follow suit.
Okay. Commissioner Tillman, you want to make your motion?
Yes, I'd like to make a motion to approve the application per staff recommendation with the revision, the attachment of 3 front-facing gables that we're looking at right now, it to have wood siding and wood trim elements, and that the windows, front door, and deck materials to be submitted for staff, or to staff for approval.
Thank you. We have a second?
I'll second.
All right, we have a motion properly seconded. All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, our next case is in Sanders at 1800 Clinch. It is case 10F-23-HZ.
Apologize, I didn't print this one out. So, 1800 Clinch Avenue. What we are reviewing here this is an after-the-fact review of exterior rehabilitation elements that do not align with the Historic Zoning Commission review and the issued COA. So, what's in front of you right now are drawings that were approved in February 2023 under the COA 1D23HZ. And what we will be reviewing now are several after-the-fact changes that were completed during construction. So I'll start with the facade windows. You can see those indicated in this photo here. So on the center bays on the second story, glass block windows were installed instead of the 1/1 double hung windows as proposed. You can see those indicated in the drawing here. The glass block windows were also extended in height from the drawings. So you can see here there is several widths of brick separating the windows and the front porch. And then in the as-built conditions, the glass block windows rest directly on that porch flashing. On the outside bays of the second story, these windows are smaller in height and width than the shown in the approved drawings. So here are the existing windows, and then the proposed, you can see those go a little bit further down. These have been enclosed. You can also see the changes in some of the brick that's been enclosed around the windows. On the dormer, these windows have been enclosed on the inside with a black painted fire-resistant backing. And then the photos, so you can see that information here. And then some additional photos submitted by the applicant. This shows slider windows installed on these new side dormers. What was approved here was 3 double hung windows, so I'll go back to those photos. These are new dormers that were approved by the HCC with three windows there. And there have been 2 slider windows installed. The COA stated that the brick repair and masonry repointing should meet the specifications of the Park Service brief. The brick used as infill is different in color and texture than the original. And then on the front entry, a projecting entry vestibule was constructed. The doors are recessed from the primary facade now. The approved elevation drawing had this being flush, and it had 2 multi-light exterior doors flanking a wood panel, flush with the primary elevation and centered on the facade. And so now there's this brick vestibule constructed, and the doors are 6-panel metal doors separated by a brick wall. So all the review of this work is after the fact. The changes to be reviewed by the Historic Zoning Commission were completed on site. They were recognized to differ from the COA. The application involves a significant amount of fire and building code related decisions driving the changes related to egress windows, et cetera. These elements require approval by the Historic Zoning Commission. Fire related requirements for duplexes and with many bedrooms should have been identified alongside the floor plan and elevation changes. And just for the Commission's recognition, we have several plans review and inspection staff that have come to this meeting, so that if the Commission has questions about the fire code, building code related aspects of this, we'll have a lot of backup for clarification. In terms of the front dormer modifications, so the HCC wouldn't typically review an interior modification to apply backing to a window. The backing could be removed should the applicants invest in those fire-rated windows. It's not visible from the street and could be construed as blinds. The side dormers, the applicant should clarify why these vary from the 3 double-hung windows approved by the HCC. The design guidelines do note that double-hung windows should be used on 2- and 3-story new construction. These dormers are new construction. The second-story interior center windows, the glass block windows, and the size is inappropriate for the building's design. It does not reflect the approved COA. The applicant should select double-hung 1/1 windows, which are compatible with the remaining windows on the house, and revise those heights to reflect the proposed drawings and be the same overall size and placement as these windows on the outer bays, and include sills as originally submitted. In terms of the entry vestibule, it somewhat reflects these engaged brick pilasters that were previously there. They used to flank the front door. The entry vestibule does differ from the approved designs, but it doesn't detract from the building's overall design. New entry doors are recommended to have similar proportions and features to a pre-1940 architecture. So the staff recommendation was new entry doors should meet the design guidelines and be submitted to staff for approval. And then the applicant should provide additional information on the brick and mortar installed and how that relates to existing masonry elements. So staff is recommending after the fact approval of the projecting entry vestibule, the covering on the front dormers, and the masonry changes, provided the applicant can speak to the brick and mortar and being compatible with historic masonry elements, and then the decrease in height on the second story outer bay windows. Staff is recommending denial of the glass block design in the center windows, the new front doors, and the change in side dormer window design and number. The applicant should select double hung windows to replace the glass block, revise that fenestration opening to match the original COA, and submit a drawing to staff for approval. Select new entry doors meeting the guidelines, and then revise the side dormer windows to reflect the original COA.
Thank you, Lindsay. Yeah. Is the applicant here? Would like to speak?
Yes, thank you. Logan Higgins, 133 South Gay Street. I will speak to some of this and then let Josh, the developer, also speak to it. And there's definitely, hopefully you all had the opportunity to go through the packet, but this project was a very complicated and at times chaotic process. The condition of the structure was very rough when the project began, and it just, the amount of work that had to be redone structurally and within the building really set them, use up a lot of their time at the beginning, and then by the time that they were ready to go, there were a few elements that had been installed that were not code compliant and had to be changed. And at this point, they were a couple of, I think 4 weeks into the semester, and were getting threats from angry parents of tenants that were supposed to be moving in. So under a lot of pressure, they made the construction manager on site tried to make some changes that would get compliance for building codes. And so we need to address those, and that's what almost all of these are. So for the brick, I'll let Josh speak to that a little bit more because I'm not as familiar with their process on that, but my understanding is that they followed the guidelines and used appropriate brick. It's just the coloration is a little bit different because of age and other factors. So I won't talk as much about that, but I do want to address the other things that were mentioned as recommended for denial, and then happy to answer any other questions. But the doors first, and I'll start with the entry doors. Staff recommends to change the entry doors to historically appropriate 1940s entry doors. And I'm not sure if you all were able to review the email from, I think, last week regarding this, where we took a look at the doors, the 6-panel doors, which are that's one of the oldest American door styles, and it's been around since the 1700s. The 6 panels. We included photos with that email, and really, this style has been used in multiple architectural styles, multiple applications, and even though it would be preferred, and I know that Josh would prefer it if they could have glass doors. In fact, the first doors that were installed had windows in them, but the availability of fire-rated doors, and I guess maybe I should back up and talk about the fire rating, but the availability of fire-rated doors with windows in them is extremely limited, and the options are very commercial-looking doors. So it wouldn't really be possible to have doors that have glass in them that are historic in any other capacity, really, without creating a very highly specific custom door. And at that point, it still couldn't be wood. They would need to be another material. So we think that the 6-panel doors are appropriate with just the time period, the pre-1940s. And so to talk a little bit about the biggest issues that drove this is the firewall. So in order to maintain the occupancy needed, the building needed to be divided into two buildings with firewall. And that firewall has to extend to the outside of the exterior walls. It either needs to extend 18 inches beyond the exterior walls, or if it stops at the exterior walls, then it needs to have 4 feet on each side, so 8 feet total of fireproofing for an hour rated fireproofing, and 3/4 hour openings, so the windows and doors. At the time of at our historic meeting, we were very early in design and didn't realize some of those implications when we were placing windows, and these windows were already here, albeit they were smaller windows at the time, but there were windows previously here, and the door, of course, is in the center. So I don't think that we would have been able to really work around that. So as we got into that, we kind of learned more details. And what happened is in construction, some of these products were ordered and then found to not be compliant with the standards required, and then installed, and then had to be taken out. So that's why the mention of the firewall, that's really controlling a lot of what you're seeing down the center. For the side dormer windows up at the top, that is, there's a few components of that. And our initial packet showed 3 windows, and then by the time we submitted our construction drawings, we had 2 double windows that were double hung, double windows, double of those. And I'm not really sure. I think that dormer splits 2 bedrooms, and so at some point in that process, it got changed, and we just didn't realize that it was different than what we had put in the application. But there was a lot of oversight on our part with the sizing of that. We were thinking that because of the sprinkler system that they didn't need to be egress windows, but the sprinkler system that got installed here is not at the required level for that. And I think maybe even with that, we may have needed another means of egress. So when they went to measure those windows after they were installed, those double hung windows, they found that they did not meet the emergency egress sizing for windows. And the only windows that will fit between the roof of the main house and the roof of the dormer and be compliant with emergency egress are going to be sliding windows or casement windows. And so, looking at the guidelines, section E2, the second 2, talks about egress windows will have to be designed to comply with fire building code provisions. And I think that that is definitely one of those cases where it's unfortunate, but it's also it's so high up, it's not highly visible, and there's really no other option for building code compliance on that. As for the glass block, which is probably the more complicated aspects of this, we're not really sure why the opening ended up bigger than the adjacent windows and without a windowsill. Not sure how that happened, but the glass block itself came about because, again, with the fire wall and the fire rating required there, the construction manager didn't realize that they had installed windows that weren't compliant, and when he learned that, he realized that they needed to get those. So they scrambled and tried for 2 weeks to find an alternative solution that could be here in time for the students to still be able to move in. And it basically came down to that being their last punch list item that was holding up occupancy. And so they looked into the options for fire rated windows, and the only thing that they could get that would get that 3/4 hour rating that they could get within a 3-month to 6-month period was going to be glass block. And so they went ahead and installed the glass block and tried to. That was really their only option at that time. Now that we have some time, we can look at other options. But so we did that. We actually reached out and got a quote for double hung windows that are fire rated, and for those two windows, the price is $18,000, and that's not counting install or delivery. That's just for the cost of those. So the lead time I think is a few months on that, and there's other options. There's shutters on the outside that would come down in the event of a fire, but I think that would also be uncompatible with the historic context. So I want to talk about the glass block and why I think that it's appropriate for this or for this time period, and I think that it should be allowed to stay. So for one, aesthetically, if you go to, Lindsay, would you care to flip to one of the side pictures that show kind of the side? From a human scale, unless you're standing dead in front of it like we are in the top photo, it reflects light the same. It looks very similar from the outside to the other windows when you're passing by, when you're at the human scale down below it. So it's not very obvious. It's not like the entire, a large section of window. It's the same proportion as the adjacent windows minus that height difference that we discussed. It's also the same proportion as the door entries below, which would be in compliant with E6. The proportions of upper level windows should not exceed the proportions of the first level. And so the way it lines up, they line up with the widths of the doors below. I think that those openings are compliant. And the fact that the entry doors are inset a little bit and that these are a little bit of a different depth from the adjacent windows, I think also helps with that lining up. Also, the material of glass block. So the pattern with that is really, if you, in the guidelines number 2, the first number 2, it says windows should be double hung, sash windows, vinyl, etc. And one of the things that I want to point out is the proportions of the square glass block is very similar to the proportions of the sash windows that you see in some of the other historic houses through there. So, for example, the adjacent house has square sashes that are very similar proportionally to these. Lastly, glass block is a historic material. It's been around since the 1800s, and it has been used since that time. And I think that if you were to build this house in 1917 under the building code requirement to have fire-rated windows, your only option would be to use glass block. There wasn't another alternative back then to comply with this. So technically speaking, this is a more time period appropriate solution than most of the other alternatives that we've looked into. So if the requirement, if we have to replace the glass block with double hung windows, I think it is not cost effective to get fire rated windows and place there at the price. So most likely the owner would need to board those up from behind, similar to the third floor windows, which really is not desirable because those are 4 by 7 feet tall and it lets in a lot of light for the tenants there. So we're hoping to avoid having to do that. So, and I'll let Josh speak to the brick. Thanks.
Good morning, Joshua Henson, 900 Phillips Avenue. So obviously, this has been a very difficult project for us with building code. This is the first house we've done under the new requirements of building code, so we were kind of shooting a new target for us. With regards to the brick, we ordered those from a manufacturer in Pennsylvania. That was the only brick they had, or that was the only brick we could find in the country on the East Coast to get old brick that was compatible with that design. We actually used existing brick from chimneys within the house too, so a lot of that lighter color brick is original to the house, and so it's all original. It's all per the time period, and we did the best we could with it. With regards to the windows, you know, we really tried our best to accommodate building code and accommodate, you know, I love old homes. I've got 6 of them in this neighborhood and elsewhere. And, you know, the last thing I want to do is try to change the character of this old, beautiful house. And like Logan said, if we were to go build this house in 1913, the only option for us to have would be those glass block. And to be honest, to order a fire rated window, I mean, $18,000 is just ridiculous, and it's because nobody orders them. And so, you know, I'm asking you all to work with me and work with us and understand kind of the pressure we were under. We were never once trying to, you know, try to pull something under the rug in front of you all, but at the same time, we had major obligations to get this house done, and you know, we were just doing our best, and so that was really the fact of the matter. So whatever you all have, you know, suggestions, we're open to them, and I appreciate all that you do for the neighborhoods.
I have questions.
Whoa, hang on. Everybody's gonna get a chance. Is the neighborhood applicant available?
They are not on this meeting. They concur with the staff recommendation, and they have significant concerns about the after-the-fact review of these changes, but they concur with the staff recommendation.
Thank you. Now I'll open it up to questions and comments first. You want me to go first, or would you like to go first?
I would just
Go
love
ahead.
the opportunity to speak to this project.
Okay. Go
And
ahead.
I think it'll help guide conversations.
Sure.
So what you're looking at is no longer a house. The additional bedrooms threw it into the commercial code, which is why there's fire sprinklers, which is why there's a lot of other requirements, because what we saw after recode, I'll digress for just a moment. The previous zoning code regulated the number of unrelated people that could live in a house, which is inappropriate, and so we took that out of the zoning code. We found that property owners and developers said, hey, now that that's no longer in place. Yes, ma'am?
Is this something Lindsay needs to hear?
No.
Okay.
Now that we're not regulating the number of unrelated people, man, we can put 14, 15 bedrooms in a house. And so it took us a little bit of time to catch up to that, which we have, which this is a result of that. I will say that I'm very proud of our plans review staff. For those of you who have gone through our process, it's pretty rigorous, it's pretty detailed. So what was approved was code compliant and met the COA. So I don't want the tail to wag the dog here. I don't want you to think that building code is requiring any of these particular items, because what we approved met the original COA, met building code. So this is changes after the fact, and my preference is that we don't get into plan review at this point. Plan review is something that takes a lot of effort, a lot of time, and I would hate for this conversation to digress into plans review where we're trying to shoot from the hip to try and find solutions, if that makes sense.
Can someone clarify if this has a certificate of occupancy and if people are residing there?
It does not.
So people live there, but you do not have a COO.
Do we have a temporary? Okay, we got a temporary.
Okay, and how does that process work?
It's safe. So we allow people to, we recognize that the property owner's kind of in a bind. And so the property is safe, but we won't issue the permanent CO until this is addressed.
When was the permit issued? I mean, because I'm not understanding how it was found by the city to be code compliant, and then was this discovered in inspections? I mean, I guess the question would be, why are the changes coming now instead of, I mean, I'm an architect, I turn in things, I get comments, hey, I missed a firewall. You fix it, but I mean, you fix it before you guys get it. So and if Peter says that it was compliant upon permitting, I'm curious as to how these changes or why they occurred.
We inspect fire rated windows and doors these junctions, and my understanding is that the window supplier didn't provide those, and then that wasn't realized until late into construction or after they had been installed. And so at the time that it was realized that they were not rated, it was very far, they were at this very kind of end point.
And
So
those
that's why.
ratings were on the specs and on the drawings? And your contractor by contract will not, I mean, sure, there's a lead time, but typically that's their responsibility. It was bidded.
That is correct. So we sent this off to 4 suppliers, and they sent us these windows, and which is why the 2 side windows are a little bit smaller than what was approved. And so we get them, our framer puts them in, and we didn't think anything else of them. So
Logan, my question's for you. Are you on the Metropolitan Planning Commission?
Yes.
So you're familiar with the process of how these boards and commissions work, right?
Yes.
How did you allow this to happen?
The
Who's watching the job? Sounds to me like that were a bunch of subcontractors just doing what they wanted, trying to get the project finished, and the means does not justify the end.
Absolutely. We had a very limited CA involvement, and we were with some of these things. But actually, with a lot of these things, they with them being realized at the very end, we were asked to come in and help with that. And at that point, it was a week or 2 before they ended up getting the CO. So we just didn't have, we weren't asked to have oversight during that process.
Well, there's not a commercial project in town that's not dealing with these same types of problems with lead times and those sort of things. And they don't just go out and do what they want to do and then come back and ask for forgiveness. I mean, it's very disrespectful to this commission, what you've done.
I don't think it would, I understand, and with all due respect, it was not with the intent of...
Doesn't matter what the intent was.
Sure.
It's wrong.
There was not enough time for them to pause the project, send in an application, wait a month, get approval, go back or not get approval, and then I'm not sure what the solution, for example, with the egress windows would be in that situation. There is an understanding that with the construction team that there would be implications that they would need to sort out. But in this moment, they had, I think, 20 tenants living in hotel rooms and living with friends, and it came down to these very few things that were more, these are finishes to an extent. And so I think that there was definitely no intent to disrespect the board or to try to, like Josh said, to pull something under the rug. They were really just scrambling to find, to figure out a solution with the limited time that they had.
Let me back. We were in the literal last hour of this whole development. And, when we were working with building inspections, they were clearly giving us we said, what do we have to do to get these kids in? And this is what we did. And they very, very clearly said, we will need to go back before the board. And we understood that. And I promise you, we would never try to pull anything. We just were trying to do the right thing and get these kids in, and then come back and we'll figure out what we need to do. It was never intent to, hey, let's try to put up glass block and try to get by with it.
I understand,
everything I do.
We're not questioning the intent, but your responsibility is to the law and the ordinances, not to the public, not to your clients.
Please understand, it is extremely difficult for people to build this. This is the first time I'd ever built this house under this IBC rating in this neighborhood. And so please understand, it's extremely difficult to do it and to abide by the rules that you are, the guidelines that you all set for us. At that point, we were just trying to get the kids in. And
So we need clarification on We need clarification on the IBC rating. When we approved this project in February, I remember it seemed like it was being pushed for a quadplex. It didn't have the appropriate parking. There were many reasons why that didn't work out. What was approved versus what happened?
And I would just say, speaking of what Commissioner Rondazzo is asking, what changed in the they keep speaking to changes in building codes evaluation. What has changed?
Sure.
The city adopted RECODE in 2020, and we adopted the 2018 IBC, which would have been regulating this in 2018.
We made a policy statement that indicates essentially you can't have 20 people living in a house. And so we capped it at 4 bedrooms. So once you get over 4 bedrooms, in Fort Sanders, we know that it's a rental market, because we did see houses coming in with 14, 15, 18 bedrooms, which it's a fraternity or sorority house, which in the building code is not regulated out of the residential code. It's regulated out of the commercial IBC. It goes from what, R2 to R3?
R4
R2, okay. The building code recognizes a difference between a family living and an apartment where you've got unrelated people in greater quantity. So by property owners and developers increasing the number of bedrooms, they cross that threshold, they get out of building a house and they start building a commercial building, which has much different regulations, which if it's your first time, it's brand new. And that's why we go through a rigorous plan review to make sure that we iron these things out on the front end.
And to just add for a legal context, this policy was challenged at one point to the Construction Appeals Board, and the Construction Appeals Board upheld this policy of the city. And that was a few years ago, if I'm not mistaken.
So no policy changes happened from February to now?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
And for context of what Josh is referring to, when he has done these in the past, they were under the IRC, the residential code, and this, after the policy was upheld, introduced and upheld, then this became IBC, and that's where, when they were doing what they've done in the past, they were more used to, there was oversight issues, and they didn't realize some of those differences.
But I think what we just established is nothing changed from February to now.
Correct. Yeah. I was just giving context for what he was saying. It's new. It was a new learning curve for them, is because when they had done this previously, projects like this, they were under a different building code.
In February, when you came, was there anyone residing in the house?
There was, but it was a totally different. It was 13 single units.
So the house was occupied when you guys came in February?
I guess now we had them moved out.
Everybody was moved out. So you all promised students that you all would have something available at a certain date, correct? And that's what pressured you and stressed you to not come back and wait for the month to come before the commission and to go ahead and move forward without approval.
Well, as you know, with the students moving in,
it's more so a yes or a no. Is that what drove?
But there's obviously an explanation behind it. Is you have to have, with an 18-bedroom house, students move in August. School year starts in August, and so you have to get leased up, or it's pretty much vacant for the whole rest of the year.
So
when you invest in,
was it 13 separate units before, apartments?
Mm-hmm.
So was your motivation in turning it into an 18-room home to avoid being under the IBC? Because you would have definitely been under the IBC on a renovation for a 13-apartment structure.
That was when I purchased this house. We didn't, we were just trying to figure out what we could do with it.
When did you start construction?
After,
March.
What month?
April.
March.
March. And you were going to have it done by August
We had it.
for people to move in?
In this environment?
Yes, sir. Yes, ma'am.
Have you ever built a house before?
I have.
Okay.
Now We had it, we were very close.
Apart from these changes, it was pretty much ready. There were a few other minor things, but that they had to resolve. But his intent was not to, in converting it to the two sides. At that point, everyone was aware of the IBC regulation. The student housing trend nationally has gone to 6 to 9 bedroom units that share large common areas. So this is 2 of those with common area on the main floor, large kitchens and everything. If they had the occupancy is R3. If it weren't for the firewall, the occupancy would need to be R2. And under R2, they would need to have an additional fire stair for each of those units. So that's why it's the firewall and also under R3. Or IBC.
Any other questions or comments from the board?
This seems like small potatoes, but why did you neglect the soldier course above the glass block? It just stops. You could have continued it.
That was the brick masons.
Travis?
As the contractor on the board, I feel I would be remiss if I didn't mention, never seen an application just throw the mason under the bus.
I mean, that was basically what it was.
I have specific sympathy with a few things happening here. Overall, I share a lot of the feelings of the board. Very disappointed in how this project's turned out and where we're at now. I'm in the process of trying to find matching brick as well. It is very, very difficult. Supply is limited. I went to the warehouse for windows that I ordered from my house yesterday to double check them. And it's kind of a process because they're boxed up. They're not easy, and they were different. They were different from the spec sheets. So that's something I got to talk to Lindsay about. So I understand when a slider shows up and it's not caught, it's missed. I still think it needs to be fixed. I think that should be on your supplier, but I understand how those things can happen. And also I understand the sympathy with architectural involvement. Sometimes it's up to when drawings are complete. Permitting, architectural administration varies by project. So I don't know exactly what involvement was ongoing in the project, but whether you're falling on the sword or we're just putting it on the mason, I'm not sure. But I'm also working on a project right now where I'm working with an owner and an architect about an expansion, and we are at that point of occupancy, size versus fire protection. We understand the cost associated with increasing in size. Generally, change orders, unexpected costs are in 2 camps. There are ones that kind of optional, owner changes, and then there are ones that you're always going to do. You didn't know about that $18,000 cost for those windows, but you're always going to do it. Just didn't know about it at the time. Didn't know about the cost, lead times. And given the age of the home, the expected lifetime of the home, I think those lead times are less significant. 3 to 6 months versus a 100-year-old home that's expected to last 100, 200 more years versus glass block that I think are wholly inappropriate. I think y'all know what you need to do.
Any other comments, questions?
I have one more comment about the brick. So when we talk about brick being compatible in a historic building, there are a few things that come to mind. It's not just always the age of the brick or the color of the brick. So another thing to be concerned about is if that was brick with modern mortar that isn't sensitive to surrounding mortar, that could eventually damage the historic brick and mortar that's surrounding that. So I think that's where some of the concern comes from, that if this was done by a mason who clearly didn't have proper oversight or whatever happened, do we know that it is not going to cause further damage to the other historic fabric that still exists as a part of that building? The brick exterior is really one of the key character defining features of this building. So by having made those significant changes to that, the glass block, all those other changes, if appropriate mortar wasn't used, you could have even more long-term issues on your hands.
Any other questions, comments? Okay.
I did forget two things in my notes here. I'm also concerned about the two front-facing double-hung windows. They appeared to be changed in size, and just based on the new brick visible, was this just another window ordering oversight? Was this intentional for any other reason? Okay. And I'm not sure how much we should get into specifics for fire ratings. I think what you mentioned, saying we shouldn't try to, figure out UL assemblies by committee is a good idea. Should this committee discuss the front entry opening, or is that something we should table for later?
What do you think, Peter?
I've got my expert here to talk code. Go for it.
I was more asking for the other commissioners here, do y'all want to discuss the design elements of the front entry? Or is that kind of, is that too specific when we have other larger concerns? For the sake of time,
I
essentially.
mean, do you mean the actual assembly and what makes it fire retardant, or?
No, I mean the visual aspects, the normal historic zoning commission things, like the applicant's suggestion for a solid metal door, things like that. Is that something we need to discuss at this point?
I mean, I hate to say that we shouldn't discuss it because it's already done and it's too expensive to fix, but we all do live in the real world.
We want to discuss it. Yes.
Go right ahead.
My feeling is that in this opening, there needs to be some transparency, whether that's two doors with lights or a single window in between. I think there's my personal feeling on transparency of an opening. I feel like there's some wiggle room there. Two solid doors and new masonry between it, I think is not appropriate. Just, again, that's kind of a squishy area. That's just my feeling. I feel like the alignment that you have with the openings above makes sense. I don't think that's a huge deviation or a detrimental deviation from the previous application.
And so I would just speak to that and say that that element is addressed in the staff recommendation related to new entry doors.
If there's no other comment, I'd like to entertain a motion at this time.
Could we talk about the temporary CO?
No.
You're done.
You're done. You've had your 5 minutes. We understand.
Absolutely.
You, of all people, know what you've done wrong.
If you're going to make a motion, there needs to be discussion about how the implications of that in relation to the temporary CO and what the, how that will play out. That's all I wanted to point out is that.
I think that's a
they should be
conversation you
aware.
have with us. That's not with them.
Okay. Thank you. You can be seated. We'll entertain a motion now.
Can I clarify in the staff recommendation, it approves the projecting entry vestibule, but the openings would remain open?
Well, so that's something that the commission has the opportunity to address. The staff recommendation did not include it, so the openings would remain open based on the staff recommendation, and the doors would remain recessed from the primary elevation as they are. So the whole vestibule in the staff recommendation is recommended to be retained. The recommendation was associated with the doors.
I feel like there's a lot going on here, and I'm hesitant to make a motion that I think everybody's just going to agree with. My initial reaction is to postpone with the applicants knowing how many board members feel, and come back to us with a different solution next month. I assume a temporary CO would last another month. Tenants wouldn't be kicked out. That's for y'all to discuss. But you were under the hammer of time before. I don't think you are now as much. That's my feeling. I feel like there's so many issues. Postponement seems like the best option.
You want to make that motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion to postpone.
Have a second?
Is that postponement to the November meeting or December?
It can be November. If y'all feel like you need December, we can.
And Travis, should you clarify that the intent of the postponement is to have the applicant come back with new solutions?
Yes.
Logan, go ahead.
Could I get some clarification on a couple of your all's thoughts? Obviously, I know that there's some
Well, hang
things
on,
that.
hang on. No, we've got a motion on the floor.
And they would still be able to make changes based on the previous COA that was given. Like, they could go back and do everything the way we had originally approved without any changes.
All right, so we have a motion. Do we have a second?
We do need to specify though if it's November or December.
Okay.
I think.
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion to postpone this application until the next meeting in November.
Thank you. Do we have a second? I'll second it. All those in favor, aye? Aye. Any opposed? Thank you.
Can I ask for some quick clarification?
I think that we can discuss this separately.
Okay.
I think what they're speaking to, and I don't want to speak for the commission, is that you've presented multiple options and talked around a lot of them, but what the commission wants is a specific submission of a solution instead of just, we prefer to keep things the way that they are.
Absolutely. I was just wanted to ask about the egress windows, but I think
We can work that out.
talk about
Thank
that.
you.
Thanks.
All right, our next case is in Old North Knox. It's at 1404 Armstrong Avenue. It's case 10A 23-HZ.
Hi, I appreciate y'all's patience.
Yes.
This is a new deck measuring 23 feet 2 inches deep by 23 feet wide. It's a rear deck located on the left side of the rear elevation. It's proposed to feature Trex flooring and a Trex railing system with square posts and smaller square pickets. And there is a new staircase that will extend to the right of the house from the deck. The scope of work also includes the removal of the 3 adjoining 10-light casement windows on a projecting hipped roof massing and the installation of paired full light French doors. So this proposed work, a new rear deck, it's located on the rear of the house. It will not be visible from the right of way. The placement won't affect any character defining features of the house, so the placement is appropriate. The composite porch flooring materials have been approved for rear elevation decks in this neighborhood in the past, including last month at 1339 Granger Avenue. The applicant should submit a final specification for the Trex flooring to staff for approval. The windows to be replaced with the French doors do not appear original to the house when we zoom in there. The muntins are inside the windows there. They're not wood windows. The installation of new paired full light French doors won't affect any character defining features of the house. It'll have a similar amount of transparency. The applicant should just submit a final door spec to staff for approval. So staff's recommending approval of 10A 23HC subject to the conditions that the applicant submit final specs for the flooring to staff for approval and final specs for the French door for approval.
Thank you, Lindsay. Is the applicant here?
Yes, sir. Matt Osborne, 1404 Armstrong.
Anything to add to what Lindsay's commented on?
Open to questions.
Thank you. I see the neighborhood rep here. Mr. Bullen, would you like to speak?
I'd like to take 45 minutes to speak here on this application.
Denied.
Sean Bolin, 115 East Scott Avenue. The neighborhood is in support of this application. As staff has said, we have approved alternative materials for decking in the past. An oversight on my part, which I don't want to hold anything up, I did not see that was full light. Typically, we ask for French doors with multi-light on this house. That's on me. We voted to approve it.
Thank you. All right. Any questions or comments from the board?
I would like to make a motion.
All right.
I move that we approve according to staff recommendation.
Thank you, Commissioner Mitchell.
Seconded.
Thank you, Commissioner Randazzo. All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you.
Thank
Good
you
luck.
for your patience.
All right. Yes. All right. Our final case for today is also in Old North Knox. It's at 219 West Glenwood Avenue, and it's case 9E 23-HZ.
Okay, so this is a request for alternative materials. The Applicant received an approval in June 2023 to replace these existing wood fluted columns in kind. They were going to replace the non-original capitals, the bases on the front and side porch, which were extremely deteriorated from wood rot, and they were going to replace them in kind. They had descriptions and drawings denoting that, but the applicant is coming back to propose new round fluted fiberglass columns, so that's the Permacast brand. These columns have been approved in Old North Knoxville over the years, most recently in 2020, noting that the composite columns are very comparable to new wood columns, and I can unpack that further if we need to. The applicant had submitted specs for a 10-inch column in the application packet, but describes a tapered column on the application form, so the final column should match the originals, which were 12-inch tapered fluted round columns, and the applicant should submit a final spec sheet to confirm. The other element here, these current square capitals are not original to the building. We have a historic photograph here indicating the original design of the capitals, and so the note here would be that the applicant should use the, it's called a Scamozzi capital option, and it reflects the design of the original. So staff's recommending approval of 9E23HC, subject to the conditions that the replacement columns match the originals with a final spec sheet submitted to staff for approval, and the capitals reflect this Scamozzi design option to reflect the original capital design.
Thank you, Lindsay. Is the applicant present?
I don't believe they are. Thomas,
Okay.
is there anyone else on
Mr. Bowen, would you like to represent the neighborhood?
115 East Scott Avenue, Sean Boland representing Old North. We agree with staff recommendation. One thing I do want to ask, Lindsay, if you could go back to the original drawing or photograph, the maybe the other one. Yes, those front two rectangles that on the front porch, upper part, those, what he has built now are L-shaped versus a solid rectangular shape. It's really difficult to tell what was there originally, and I'm not sure if it's going to be that visible, but we might want to watch that and let him know that if it looks substantially different, visually it needs to be what was there. Otherwise, we agree with staff recommendation.
Thank you. I'll open it to questions, comments from the board.
Sean, can you clarify, what do you mean by L-shaped? Are you saying that capital is only on the outside and not on the inside?
No, not the capital. So what Lindsay's circling right now,
Okay.
He has shaped it as an L, so it's a facade shape versus a solid structure. That would be a rectangular. I don't know what was there originally. I have always assumed that there were solid structures, not an L-shaped facade.
So is the one we see right there the real one or not? I mean, is that what's there now?
Yes, that was the original, and what is there does not, where they are building now does not appear to match the original.
Oh, okay.
Or whatever was there when they started the
Correct.
project.
What we
right.
have
Since we
documented.
don't know, right.
Yes.
I'll entertain a motion if we have one, or if there are no other questions.
Sure. I'm still not entirely sure what you mean by the facade, but I guess we can, that would be a different application review or something like that. So with that, I'll make a motion to approve with staff, per staff recommendation with the staff conditions.
I second.
Thank you. We have a motion properly seconded. All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Before we adjourn, I just would like to thank Peter and your staff for having our backs on these projects. I know you guys take a lot of grief, but you also do an excellent job, so thank you very much.
You're welcome, and thank you. As it relates to a couple of things, first thing I want to do is introduce Mark Reel. We just promoted him from a zoning inspector to the zoning chief. So Mark,
Hi, Mark.
He's been with us for a little bit here, and he's picked up zoning quite nice. He's got great demeanor to navigate these fun topics. We're looking forward to him getting more involved with these boards. Secondly, As it relates to that one large issue, we don't take responsibility for their issue, but we're putting measures in place. We're providing more zoning training for our building inspectors because we hammered home building code, building code, building code, and we've started providing training for them to understand and recognize when overlays are involved and there's COAs and starting to look at zoning as well as building. So hopefully we'll be able to identify these things earlier on in the process. And as it relates to that project, I would love to hear from you guys, like what the end goal is. We'll try and work with them, but I have no problem voiding their temporary CO at some point and making them vacate to push the issue of compliance with whatever the COA, whether it's the original or whether it's revised, doesn't matter to me. But I want to be able to work with this board to understand what an appropriate timeline is. And we can pull that pin when we need to.
Okay. Thank you, Peter. And also, I'd just like to thank the board. We've been here a long time this morning, but I feel like everybody did an excellent job participating and representing our responsibilities. And Lindsay, thank you as always. All right, this meeting's adjourned.